Welcome to the PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. Today, we're interviewing unicorn PA Benjamin George. Benjamin's been a PA only 5 years, and in that time has managed to become the lead of his department, has multiple side hustles, and part-time jobs that are helping him to provide for his family in a really great way and also to add value to his organizations. I cannot wait to share this conversation with you. Without further ado, here he is, Benjamin George. All right. Benjamin, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. So tell us a little bit about you and your background as a PA and what you do on a day-to-day basis.
So I've been practicing as a PA for about 5 years. I work in a large psychiatric group that contracts with a hospital. My primary day-to-day job is mostly working in the psych emergency room, but we also have a pretty wide reach into other areas of the hospital. We have a consult service, inpatient team, adolescents, outpatient services. So I pretty routinely will cross cover in those areas and cover for people who are out or if they just need help somewhere.
And is the psych ER different than the regular ER?
Yeah, so yeah, so there's not a ton of psych emergency rooms in the country. Um, but yeah, ours stands apart, so it's not physically connected to the medical ER. But basically, when patients come in and they come into the medical ER and they have a psychiatric complaint, they usually get sent up to us, or there are ways for them to directly come right to the psych emergency room. So we have a lot of interaction back and forth. We definitely have a lot of communication with the medical ER, but yeah, it is a separate facility.
Are they medically stable when they're coming to you, or could they be acutely ill and have a psychiatric diagnosis?
Yeah, if they're coming from the medical ER, yeah, we usually have to have a chat with whoever the ER provider is that's sending them over, and we hope that they're medically stable. Certainly, with psych complaints, you see a lot of things like people overdosing or having, um, you know, dangerous side effects with their medications, or they might have self-harmed before they came in. So we have to ask a lot of questions and really verify with the medical ED team that they are stable to come up. We see a lot of alcohol withdrawal, people who have sky high blood pressures and whatnot. So it definitely keeps you sharp on your medical skills getting people from there, because we every once in a while we'll get somebody who's not stable, and you got to handle that and sometimes send them back or treat it in our treat it up in the psych emergency room. But,
And what is your favorite part about your job?
oh gosh, it's funny because most people, when they hear that I work in a psych emergency room, their initial reaction is like, "Oh, that sounds terrible. I would never want to do that." Um, I love it. The stories are so funny every day. We have a really good crew that we work with. It's a good rapport, and just the patients that you see, they're just um, one, you can do a lot of good to help them. Two, they're just it's such an interesting group of people to care for and to treat. It's kind of unlike anything I was ever exposed to as a student. You just get some really, really sick people that come in with some wild stories. So I guess if you're my overall favorite kind of patients that I see is we get is for those who haven't had dealt with a lot of psych in a while. We have a lot of bipolar patients who are in a manic episode, and manic people like to travel. So we get a lot of patients from the DFW airport. So anytime we get a DFW airport drop off, I'm always excited. I want to sign up for that patient because usually got something crazy going on.
So it's someone who was manic elsewhere, decided to take a trip, ended up at the airport, and
Yeah,
suddenly
yeah,
landed. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes they think Joe Biden wants to see them in Washington D.C., so they sell all their possessions and they get on a plane. And when they're on the plane, they start taking off their clothes and doing all sorts of wild stuff. So we get probably one or two from DFW every day, and it's kind of that type of story.
Yeah. Some wild stories, I'm sure. So I'm assuming you had a psych rotation in school as a student, but it was most likely not in a psych ER.
No, it was. I did not spend a lot of time in the psych ER. So I did rotate. I went to school at UNT Health Sciences Center here in Fort Worth, and we did rotate at the hospital that I work at now. Most of my rotation was spent in the long term care unit for psych emergency. I did actually have one shift in the psych emergency room that I work in now. But it was, I think it was like it was actually like a Thanksgiving night, and there was pretty much nothing going on. It was actually a really slow night.
And how did you get into the psych ER? Is that something that you really loved psych, or did the job just fall into your lap?
Well, when I got hired, I actually got hired on where I'd rotated at our long-term care facility. Um, but it was one of these things where I started I started cross covering at the psych emergency room, and I kind of got trained up so that I would be able to cross cover there just because I wanted to be able to make a little bit of extra money on the side. And I absolutely loved it. And then it was just one of these awesome opportunities where I had been up there for a while. I got to know everybody, and then there became a position available that had, phenomenal hours. And I emailed everybody I could think of as soon as that position opened up, and I've been there ever since.
We interrupt this broadcast with a very important announcement. You are not making enough money. Your practice and your physician do not understand the value you are adding to their patients, and therefore, you aren't earning what you're worth. If in the past your requests for a raise have been met with one single word, no. If you're working more hours than ever and seeing more patients, but you're not making any more money and you're feeling pissed about it. If you feel like you've hit the ceiling of your income band, this guide is for you. I've compiled the 5 most costly and most common mistakes that PAs make when asking for a raise, and I've told you how to avoid them and what to do instead. Download your free guide at tracybingaman.com/mistakes. So tell me about your phenomenal hours. What is your schedule and why is it so great?
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 8 to 8. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, so when that opened up, I got pretty excited. Now sometimes with the way things have been going lately, I've had to sometimes I do Sunday, Monday, Tuesday instead of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So we kind of have been alternating those recently.
But either way, you have a stretch of 12-hour shifts, longer days, and then 4 days together that you're off.
Right, right.
It's beautiful. I love 4
Yeah,
days together that you're off. That is
yeah, it's
awesome.
great. And most of the people I work with are pretty flexible, so that makes it nice too. So if you got like a longer trip that you want to take and you don't want to use a lot of your PTO, sometimes we'll swap shifts around, or I'll work like 6 straight and then have like almost 2 weeks off. Um, so you can definitely, we got good colleagues working up there, so we can take advantage of that and still keep our PTO.
Yeah, it's beautiful when you have a team that they all get it and they also want that in exchange and they're willing to trade and make that work for you. So tell me about, I mean, it really sounds like this was a very strategic move. Like you were in long term, which like doesn't sound like you're like, I hate it, this is not where I want to be, but that you had gained these skills and this ability to cover the ER. And then when the psych ER said, hey, we're hiring, you were very well positioned to step into that role. Almost so much so that it would be like, why would they ever hire anyone else, right? You already work there. You're already trained. Like you are the shoe in for that position. Was that intentional on your part, or did that sort of just happen?
I think so. I mean, very early on, one of my priorities when I first started working was I wanted to create so much value that I'd be able to kind of mold my kind of not make my own position, but kind of have a lot of say into what I was going to be doing for the department. So I'd say that a lot of the groundwork for it was very intentional. I making sure that I was trying to be one of those people to volunteer to cross cover in other areas. We had a lot of we had when they when our department first came out and said that they wanted more people to work on cross covering. Um, there was a lot of pushback, and a lot of people were like, I really want to stay where I'm at. I don't want to cover other areas. I'm very comfortable here. But to me, it was one of those things that it was a chance to create a lot of value. It was a chance to make myself useful to the department as kind of a newer PA there, and kind of establish myself as somebody who is like a flexible teammate. Um, and by doing that, it's really, I mean, it's just opened a ton of doors. So that was, yeah. So setting the groundwork early by being a team, a team player, um, cross covering in those other areas, learning all the different skills you would need to work all the different departments. It was all that was all intentional, and it definitely has paid off.
Yeah. I mean, I think that when we are in our career, if we ask ourselves, what kind of person would I want to work with? So say we're hiring for our group, we're going to bring someone in, who would we want to hire? And if you think like, I have a decision, I can stay where I am, stay where I'm comfortable, refuse to change and sort of not adapt to what this organization is asking me to do, or I can be the person who they're like, wow, he or she has these great skills. They can do these 3 different units. They're willing to work these times. You're going to want to work with that second person. You're going to want that person to come on your team because they've already proven that they're flexible, that they're a team player. And I think that also shows a certain level of initiative that you didn't say like, oh, someone else will do that, right? Someone else will cross cover. Someone else will do that. I'm just going to stay kind of where I am.
Oh, for sure. And when we do, I try to help out with the interviews for the new APPs or people that we're trying to bring on. And the whole teamwork, team player thing is always my first question, just without fail, is, what would make you a good part of this team? What qualities do you have that would make us want to work with you? That kind of thing. So I think trying to be, like you were just saying, trying to be that person, trying to have those good qualities that'll make other people want to work with you, that'll make your bosses like you, your coworkers like you, everyone else that you're working with like you and want to work with you. I mean, it's better for the team, and it really sets the groundwork for good things to happen for you later on.
And what I have found in my career that it's not necessarily the person making the hiring decision that you have to have had impressed in the past. So in my career as a general surgery PA, and then when I moved into urology, I happened to cross paths with this one plastic surgeon a lot. We were in the OR the same day every week. So I would see him in the PACU. And then when I was doing urology, I'd be in the PACU, like meeting with my surgeons or finishing up a case, and I would run into him. And I never worked directly with him. I always was just near him. And I think he knew of me. It's a relatively small community hospital, even within a big network. So he knew who I was. I knew who he was. I knew he had a private practice. And one day I'm sitting there, it's like a snowstorm February. I'm working in urology. I'm really trying to get everybody seen because I'm worried. My husband is out of town and I'm worried the school is going to close. So I'm like motivated to get some stuff done this day. I was charting, I was calling people, I was like getting stuff done. And I happened to be sitting next to him in the PACU, and he turns to me and he says, "Hey, Tracy, what does a plastic surgery PA make?" And I'm like, in the middle of a note, "I can send you some data from the AAPA, like if you're interested." And he's like, "Okay, yeah, here's my email." He like writes it down, and I keep doing my note. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, why? Like, why are you asking that question? And he's like, "Oh, I'm thinking about having someone cover my ER call." And I'm like, "Well, what do you need? Like, how often? Like, what's the frequency of your call? How many days are you on in a row? What are you looking for coverage wise?" And he tells me, and I'm like, "I'll do it."
Right.
And he's like, "What?" I'm like, "I'll do it." And he's
Yeah.
like, "Well, you got to send me what you want to make." I'm like, "Yeah, we'll like figure out the details, but like I am willing to do that for you. It's a great use of my skills. I am certain, like we haven't done any negotiating, and I'm like, I'm certain this guy is willing to pay me more than the hospital is paying me to cover call. Like I just know it deep in my bones." And so I start working for him. Like as a 1099 employee, I'm taking his ER call for 18 months. And then a year and a half later, I am like, I can't work at this hospital anymore. I get super burned out. I quit. And he is my second phone call. My first phone call is to my husband, like, "Hey, remember that time we talked about me? I resigned today." And he's like, "Okay, we had talked about it. We knew it was going to happen." And my second call was to my current attending, where I was like, "Hey, I'm ready." And he was like, "We're not ready for you." I was like, "Get ready. I quit my job. Like find a place for me." And 6 weeks later, I started my current job. I'm like, I'm like going to just start showing up at your office. And I actually did. Like I was like, "I'm going to come shadow." And he was like, "Okay, any day works. There's a surgeon there every day." And I just started showing up 2-3 days a week. I was unemployed. What was I doing anyway? So I just started going to their office. And the one guy's like, "Why does this woman keep showing up?" I'm like, "Oh, you're going to hire me." He's like, "Are we? I didn't hear that in a meeting." I was like, "Oh no, but you are. And then like they
You might
did.
not know it yet, but it's happening.
Here it's happening. But yeah, that was totally from like he had never scrubbed with me. He didn't know of my surgical abilities, but he knew who I had worked with and he
Yeah,
knew my reputation just
right.
from being around. Like he
Yeah,
probably asked the nurses in the PACU, like, how's Tracy? Good, not
right.
good, you know?
And you know that if you're not doing your job and you're like not fun to work with and you're miserable, those nurses are going to be like, do not hire her. Um, she's awful. We don't want her on this team. And
She
we
doesn't call
and
us back, you know, whatever you've done poorly in the past.
we've had really strong applicants apply to our group, and it's the same thing. It's like, hey, no, I worked with her I worked with this gal at a previous job, and like these were the issues we had, or this guy was, he's really competent, but he's really lazy, and those are all. I mean, we take that into account.
Yeah, I think being motivated to work efficiently and safely and also being good to work with. Like you can be very pleasant to work with, but you're only taking 3 patients and everyone else is taking 8. Like that's not okay, right? Like people are going to notice that you're not doing or like, oh, when we're handing out assignments, like this person's never here. So, like or they come late to that meeting where we're, getting things done. No, like you can't your reputation is going to go everywhere with you and it starts as a student for sure.
Okay, I'm glad you said that. I say that all because we have a lot of students rotate through, and I talk to people all the time about that. Like, hey, like even if you're not sure that this is the field that you want to go into, you got to act interested. You got to make yourself the best student you can possibly be because you never know. Like, I mean, when I started, when I did rotations, I said I'll never do psych and I'll never do OB-GYN, and here I am working in psych. Haven't gone over to OB-GYN yet, but I think one of the things, you open those doors, you give those yourself these opportunities when you act like the kind of person that you would want to work with. And then you're right, it starts as a student. Yeah, you got to be interested, show up early, stay late, do all the things you need to be doing. People are attracted to that. People want to work with those kind of people, and it led to multiple job offers. So anyway, yeah, I tell the students that all the time. I'm glad you feel this.
It matters. It really matters. Even if you're rotating on elective and plastic surgery in a town that you will never work, it matters because that person knows someone who knows me. I don't know how it works. It's like a magical voodoo, like PA network, but like they're in a Facebook group with like the wife of the practice owner and she knows me and they call me and they say, hey, we're thinking about hiring this person for family medicine in Montana, right? Like nowhere near here. And they somehow get a hold of me. And I am truly, as a preceptor, I'm going to tell them like, hey, this is someone I would love to work alongside, or I have concerns about this person being on our team.
Yeah, it's funny how small that. I mean, it just feels like there's a million medical practices out there, a million PAs, physicians out there, and it is a small world, super small.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like living in a small town of medicine. Everyone just knows someone who knows someone else. So I want to dig a little bit deeper. We've kind of been dancing around this topic of how you can intentionally create value in the workplace. It sounds like this is something that you did from the get-go. They said, we need volunteers. And you put your hand up and said, hey, I want to be the person that fills that need of yours. I want to add value. How have you been able to do that? And how have you been able to leverage that value to get more money, better hours, whatever great outcomes that you have been enjoying in your career?
Well, it seems overly simple, but just asking, what can I do for the department? That was like, I think maybe 6 months in, I was just like walking somewhere with, the head of psychiatry, and I didn't see him a ton, but I let him know. I was like, hey, I really want to be involved in this department, and I want to be here for a long time, and I want to be, I want you guys to want me to stick around. Like, what can I do to make myself more valuable to the department? And he was, he told me like, hey, well, let's get you more involved. If this is something that you're interested in, like, why don't we start with, we're always looking for people to be on these committees. So, this started as, I think volunteered to be on like 1 or 2 committees, and I got to know, you start getting to know people. I start getting to know, there was some scheduling committee that I was on, and I start getting to know the scheduler really well. Um, she's a great gal, but she's the one who started being able to schedule me for the psych emergency room because I knew I was really interested in that because there's always extra duty. If we're short staffed, somebody calls out, you get the sense is super high. So I was like, I really want to be on that short call list. So I, start calling her, asking, hey, when can I get in? When can I shadow? When can I do some extra hours up there so I can learn this stuff? So that was super helpful. So then I'm set up. I'm familiar with all the PEC. That's the Psych Emergency Center. I got familiar with all the attendings up there. I get familiar with the other APPs, the nurses working up there. And then, I've been doing that. I do that for a couple months, and all of a sudden, this awesome position opens up, this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday position, and I'm immediately gunning for it. As were quite a few other people, including providers that already worked in the psych emergency room. So I had to interview for the position with people who already worked in that emergency room. And I think by having a good attitude, by consistently showing up, working hard, I ended up getting the job, which I think made a lot of people mad. But I think I had kind of separated myself from some of the people that had a reputation up there for not working real hard and not getting along real well with other people. So anyway, it worked. So that was great. So that worked out really well for me. And then once I got up there, I tried to continue, living by those values that I had started out with. Try to cover your colleagues when they're out. Make sure that you're seeing patients the whole shift and not slacking off, even if you could. And eventually it led to promotion to team lead. So for the last 3 years, I've been a team lead up there. And then bouncing off that team lead thing, that's opened up other possibilities as well. We have, this is recently in the last 6 months, but the hospital in general, they wanted more APP representation. So we have essentially what's a board of directors for the APPs. It's called the governance committee. And anyway, somebody nominated me for the committee, and then somebody else, once I was voted onto the committee, nominated me to be president of the committee. So so that's been a really cool opportunity. I've been able to get some involvement with that recently. We've been running some really cool projects. I get to sit on the board of directors with the physicians and kind of get a little insight into what that looks like. So I'm hoping that will maybe continue to open some doors down the line. But it's been a really good opportunity to continue adding that value.
And this has been in a relatively short amount of time because you've only been practicing for 5 years. I mean, that's a lot of moves. Like that sounds like 25 years worth of like moving here and getting a, nomination for this and doing that. And I think for those listening who are like a committee, like I think committee is almost like a curse word. Like people are like, oh, they want me to join a committee. Like, I don't have time for a committee. I don't want to join the committee, but you join the committee. And I feel like of all the committees, like, let's go ahead and say scheduling is not the sexiest committee to be on, right? Like, that's not the one that everyone's like, you know what I want to do? Scheduling, right? Like, that's amazing. But you said yes to a need that the department had. And by filling that need, you did a couple of things. You showed them that you're a team player and you set yourself apart from all the other people who didn't even bother to ask the question, how can I add value to this department? And you used that wisely, which almost sounds like, hey, be a little manipulative. Like, yes, you have to, on purpose, make moves strategically. Like, you're not just going to wander into like a raise and an amazing schedule. Like, those things have to be strategic.
Right. And on like a personal, slightly selfish level, but I mean, we talk about side hustles and making a little extra money, but when you're doing the scheduling, I'm usually the first person to know about all the open shifts that come up. Or people know that I'll cover them. They know that I'm involved, and they'll just call me and be like, hey, can you cover this shift, or can you find somebody to cover this? So I mean, it's been great. And just you kind of have first dibs on some of these more desirable shifts.
And I
So
think that inside information, not like it's not bad that you know first. Like someone has to know first.
yeah,
So whoever's
yeah.
in charge of the schedule or whoever's in charge of hiring, like if you feel like, and this might be a better way to approach it. I think it doesn't feel great when someone comes and says like, well, we need somebody for this committee and we choose you. And you're like, oh, that's
Right.
not the committee I want to be on. So a great way to avoid that is to say, hey, I don't think we're doing well in this area, or I hate the way that we handle hiring and orienting. Like when I was orienting, no one taught me a thing. Oh, well, great. Like go ahead and fix it, right? Figure out who's in charge of the onboarding for new providers in your group and change the way that you onboard, because then the next person who gets hired won't be saying the same thing that you're saying. So
Right.
instead of just like, oh, the department says they want me to do scheduling, like what makes you mad? Like what don't you enjoy? What do you see as a potential area for improvement? And meet with your manager and say, hey, or whoever's in charge of that, hey, I want to be involved in this. And she'll be like, oh, they're desperate, right? Pretty much every committee needs
Mhm.
people,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially excited people who are like, I want to change this.
Right. Right. Yeah. The excited people, it just resonates with me for my surgical rotation. I worked with this great surgeon. He was just one of these people that we talk about. He had all the qualities that we've talked about in this conversation, just somebody that you want to be working with. And he always told me, and I'll never forget it, just look for the people with the gleam in their eye. Look for the people who are excited to be here doing what they're doing. Those are the people that you want to surround yourself with. Those are the people that you want to be, in close contact with. And those are the people that, you know, I think that you're probably going to rise to the top with.
Yeah. And medicine is a slow moving, bureaucratic organization,
Mhm.
but change is happening. And so I think you can sit around and complain about the way things are at your organization, or you can be one of the people who says, this should not be happening, right? These
Right.
surgeons should not have zero understanding of what a surgical PA does. Like, we need to train them. We need to tell them, we need to show them, and here's how we're going to do it, as opposed to for 10 or 15 years saying, my surgeons don't get it. They don't
Right.
get it. Like, that's not creating any change. That's just complaining about how things are.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about side hustling or diversifying your income. So you have this primary job, and it sounds like you're often picking up extra shifts on those 4 days off that you are doing extra, which is going to help to increase your income. What else are you doing, and how is that serving your family?
Well, I've done a couple of different things over the years. Like you said, yeah, working extra duty, whether it's in the psych emergency center or with a consult service or whoever needs it. That's always been a pretty good source of pretty stable income. I mean, there's almost always somebody who's sick or that they need coverage at. So I mean, that's one great way um, to boost income. Getting into leadership positions, now that's something that has also helped, because that's something that you can take to a negotiation when you're ready to negotiate salary, and you can talk and be like, look, hey, I'm doing my job and I'm also doing these other things. I'm spending 4 or 5 hours a week on the, working on the schedule. I'm helping this committee do this project. I'm doing a lot of things off the clock to help out. And it's helping this department move forward, or helping the hospital in general move forward. So those are all things that you can take to a negotiation. So I would say that that's another way to boost your salary, is if you're getting into like a leadership role, make sure to take that to the table. Um, you had mentioned having connections with people that weren't necessarily even people that you were directly working with. For a little while, I was working in our medical emergency room just because I was down there talking to them a lot. They got to know me. They ended up hiring me as needed to cover the medical emergency room. So I did that for a little while for a side gig. My main side gig right now, what I've kind of been focusing most of my time on, is I got in. There's a adolescent psychiatrist in the area, and she was looking to bring on 2 APPs to see some to kind of help her run her clinic and to see some patients, and that's been a good gig as well. I've been doing that 1 day a week um, so far, and then I think I actually may work a little bit more for them coming forward this next year, because they're going to let me do some telehealth stuff from home. So that's been another source of income, in addition to in addition to everything else that I was just mentioning.
I mean, it sounds like you're doing a lot of things. So I have to ask, what drives you? Because there's a lot of people who are 5 years into their career as a PA with one full time job that they don't love, and they're just feeling stuck and like it's the only way. And you are here like, I do this, I do that. These people called me. I'm like, I want to hire you and I don't even know you. So what drives you to kind of be in all these places and doing all of these things?
Um, I'd say there's, that's probably a multifactorial question. I really love what I do. I feel like, I've heard you talk about having those unicorn jobs. And I feel like, especially with my psych emergency gig, it's a unicorn job. I don't dread going into work. I like being there. So if they need extra help, I mean, there's days that I'd rather be doing something else, but I do enjoy it when I'm there. Building a life for my family that I really enjoy. Um, that drives a lot of it. My wife's able to stay at home, which has started recently. We have 3 kids. Um, so, her transitioning to staying at home full time has been great. And then just to, have a little bit of extra spending money since she's no longer working, that's a major factor. Maybe wanting to pick up some extra hours, making sure that student loans get knocked out. That's another motivating factor. I don't think I work too many hours, because I usually work about 45 to 50 hours a week at this point, which I think is pretty manageable. But ultimately in the future, I'd like to maybe decrease that. But by getting on top of this stuff early, a little bit, putting in some hard work in your younger years and kind of laying the financial groundwork to be able to do that, to be able to cut back and kind of coast a little bit later in life, that's really important to me also. So I feel like, um, I know that you're into the finance side of things as
Very
well.
much, yes.
Laying the groundwork, getting a little bit of extra spending cash, or not even spending cash, but getting a little bit extra cash to put down towards investments and whatnot. That's been really important to me. So I don't think I'll probably work this hard for the rest of my life, but I think certainly it's paid off really well over the past 5 years, and I'll probably continue working pretty hard and for at least a little bit longer.
I am so excited to share all about a new free live training that I've put together for you. It's the 4 secrets of top income earning PAs, the things that they know that you don't know. If you can internalize these 4 things, make the necessary mindset shifts, and take the steps to execute on them, you will be able to scale your PA income without having to change jobs, specialties, or cities. It's a live workshop style masterclass where I'm teaching these secrets and sharing about my own success negotiating for better pay and better hours clinically as a PA. Head to tracybingaman.com/masterclass to choose the date and time that works best for you. It's of course linked in the show notes, but in case you missed it, that's www.tracybingaman.com/masterclass. And it sounds like this is a great blessing because there's a lot of people out there whose full-time job is 45 to 50 hours a week. And what you've done is be able to craft a full-time position that is only 3 days a week. And then you have these other 4 days a week that you can say, hey, does our family need more money? I'm going to pick up extra of these like per diem shifts and also have this other job with maybe some flexibility with being able to do telemedicine. So what I hear is some people are like, oh, I'm stuck. I work 45 hours a week and my income is capped because it's my full-time position. But you kind of shifted your income to the beginning of the week for what you need. And now you have this ability with these extra days to earn more if you want to, and kind of to diversify what's coming into your home. Because you went from 2 people working to 1 person working, and you're kind of diffusing that risk by saying, hey, if tomorrow the hospital that I work for full-time called and said like, sorry, we don't need you anymore, which doesn't sound like it's going to happen, but is always a possibility. You're like, oh, I have 2 other jobs, right? I have 2 other sources of income.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, um, for sure. I think having the multiple sources of income is super important. In the future, I'd like to maybe even get more into some of the passive income stuff. With the housing market going crazy, I haven't quite dived into the like rentals and stuff like that. But having a couple of sources of income, just in case, because you never know what's going to happen. I like to think positively, and I like to think that life is going to have more positive surprises than negative surprises. But you got to be ready in case there is something like that. You don't want to negate years of working hard and saving your money because something bad happens and you like are not bringing in anything. So hopefully with some of these side gigs, we'll, you know, if that ever happened, God forbid, then we would be okay. I did want to touch on, one of the, you were just kind of mentioning this with the kind of crafting, um, with the 312s. If you have the opportunity to work 312s or 410s, I just think that is like the greatest thing you can, it's like one of the greatest opportunities out there, because that allows you to potentially, if you're going to do something on the side like I do, um, you can usually negotiate if you're working just as needed or like 1099 for somebody. You can usually negotiate a much higher hourly rate than you would if they were paying you a lot of benefits. So that's another thing is, um, if you're able to work 312s or 410s, I think that's one of the things that I wasn't necessarily aware of until I started looking around for those side gigs and realizing that I had a lot more negotiating power than I thought.
Yeah, I equate being per diem or like locums or 1099 or sort of ad hoc with someone in medicine to being a consultant in business. So in business, my husband works in corporate America. You could leave your corporate job and become a consultant and almost double your income doing consulting. It's bananas. And this happens all the time in corporate America. People leave their job, they become a consultant with a firm, they come back to the company they just left as a consultant. They are doing their same job. It blows my mind. I'm like, I don't understand how this works. But now that I'm more in this, talking to people about unicorn jobs and figuring out like 1099 and all of that, that employer doesn't have to pay for your health insurance, for your retirement. And those things are costly to employers. And also, if it's an arrangement where they're like, hey, we call you when we need help, they are willing to pay you for that availability like last minute. There's value to them to saying, hey, it's Tuesday morning. We need someone at 4 p.m. Are you free? And you saying yes means that they're able to bring in income in a way that otherwise they weren't going to be able to be if you're covering sick time or maternity leave or that kind of thing. So it definitely is, I think that in that way, you can almost set your own rate. You can't ignore the market, but if you're good and you have value and someone calls you and says, hey, we see that you're doing this, we see you're killing it, we want you to do that and help us at our practice, you can really set your rate way higher. No one should be working. I'm going to say this and then I'm going to think about it later and then maybe I'll renege. No one should be working a per diem job where their hourly rate is not significantly higher than their regular hourly rate.
Yep. I agree. I think people sometimes don't know. I think people are scared to negotiate. So that's another thing that I talk with a lot of the students that come through. Um, and I just saw this when my class graduated. We had people taking horrible jobs for less money than some of their colleagues, some of their peers were taking. And it was just, I think that people are scared to negotiate, or they don't want to, or they settle for lousy jobs just because it's the first thing that comes along. That goes back to what we were saying earlier about how you want to set yourself up like as a student for multiple opportunities. Because I always thought, like I said, I never thought I'd do psych. I always thought I was going to do emergency or I was going to do ortho. Um, and when I came out, it was like one of those things where, you just I had a couple different offers in a couple different fields, and I went with psych because it happened to be the best offer, and it has really paid off.
And I believe that that is more about you than about the fact that you work in psych. So I think that the person listening can say, hey, I don't work in a psych ER. I don't work in, the Fort Worth. That doesn't matter. What matters is how you're showing up and that you're very intentional and very directed about the way that you're adding value to your organization. And there's a lot of us who aren't doing that, or who just realized while listening to this podcast that that was like something that you should be thinking about, how much value you're adding to the organization versus how much they're actually paying you.
Right. And I think a big mistake that some people make, and I see this with a couple of my colleagues in particular, is people don't want to do anything extra for their job or the department if it doesn't come with an immediate financial reward. And that's a huge mistake. I think people completely underestimate how important it is to build to by doing the extra, by going the extra mile, by doing the extra things. You may not get compensated on a paycheck right away, But what you're doing is you're setting yourself up to springboard yourself into better positions in the future, which tends to work out monetarily for you. But it just opens up a whole lot of other doors as well, that aren't just financial. So I guess I would say, if anybody's listening to this and you're hesitant to like want to jump in and help out or do anything extra in the department, I mean, just remember that there are long-term benefits that you might not think about right away, that come with adding value to what you're doing and adding value to your department.
And I see that as investing long term. You're investing in goodwill, right? You're investing in the person who decides who's the leader, who gets the better shift, or who gets the promotion if there's only one coming. You're investing in that bank account long term. And it puts you in a unique position where if there's 10 PAs in your department and everyone's sort of doing the same and you're doing a little bit more, there will reach a point where you will be clearly adding significantly more value to the organization than they're paying you. And that is the time when you want to say, hey, I want to work days. Hey, I want to do this. Hey, I want to raise. This is what, and I think that it's okay to say in that negotiation, I have been adding value above and beyond that of my colleagues in this way, in that way, and in this way, because they may know that, but it's important to remind them, especially when you're having a discussion about how much you're going to be making next year or next month or next paycheck.
And that's a great way to start. If you're having a salary negotiation, I feel like that's the best way to start, is like, hey, listen, this is the value that I'm adding. This is how I'm, growing as a person and, contributing to the department, instead of just coming in and saying, hey, I would like her, this is what I want. I want you to
Give me more. Give me more. Absolutely. And there are opportunities, even if there's no committee. So I work in a private office now, and there's no committee for patient experience, right? We occasionally have meetings, sometimes things come up. And so you can create an initiative or just start improving your own patient experience. Just do a little tiny study. Hey, when I do this with people, they seem a lot happier. They're more likely to come back. They refer their friends. I did it for a couple of weeks. It's really panning out. People are calling less with post-operative questions because I'm telling them ahead of time. We should all be doing that. It doesn't have to have a name or a committee or like actually be backed by scientific research. You can literally just say, hey, I see these patients post-op and everyone's complaining that they're not moving their bowels. I just started telling people before surgery to start taking Colace, and now that's not happening anymore. It's, 2 months worth of research that you're doing with your own patients. And then you say to the practice, I think we should institute this. And if there's a scientific article to back it, like bonus points, but really you're trying it, it's working, you're proving that it's working for your specific patient population. And you're saying to the practice, our patients will be pooping, and patients who are pooping are happier than patients who aren't pooping. So this is why we should do this.
Yeah. And then you're the gal who comes up with brilliant ideas.
I mean, and then you're the person who they look to when they say, here's a problem. I think Tracy might be able to solve it. Or they say, hey, our nursing call volume decreased and we were able to utilize this one person who spent the whole day answering phone calls about poop to do something else that was productive and revenue generating for the practice. It's not always one-to-one. And I think as providers, we lose sight of the bigger picture. We think, I add value based on my RVUs. I add value based on my revenue. I add value based on the care I provide directly one-on-one to patients, which is absolutely true, but it doesn't stop there.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, I'm all jacked up. I always get really excited after we have an interview because I'm like, let's go change the world. And then I do. I think there are areas for improvement in every practice that everyone is listening. There is something that you can improve in your practice. And this is a hint to find it. It's probably the thing you're bitching about over lunch.
Right.
So when you sit down with a colleague and you're like, God, I just can't stand it when people call and they're constipated. I don't know why that's on my mind, but that's my one topic for the day. Like when they call and they're constipated, it just pisses me off. It's such a pain. Then they can't poop. They're post-laparotomy. It's a huge pain. And you're complaining about it. It's the thing that you come home and at dinner, you're like, you know what just makes me mad about work? And your spouse is like an accountant and they're like, what? Like they don't really get what you're saying. But the thing that is like, oh, this thing is annoying me, like fix that
Yeah.
thing. Start with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Spend 5 or 10 minutes a day just thinking about, hey, what annoyed me at work today and how could we fix it? Probably come up with some pretty good ideas. And then you could be that person that solves the problems for the department.
Yay. And then they'll pay you more and promote you and make you the king of all
Right.
the things, just
This
like that.
lady, yeah, she solved constipation.
For the whole world. Look out, world. Everyone's going to be pooping at our practice postoperatively now. All right. So if people are like, this is cool and I want to learn more about Psych ER, how can they find you, connect with you? Where can they reach you online?
Oh, well,
You
it
can
would
just
have
say your
been,
email.
what's that?
If it's just your email, that's fine. Wherever's
Oh,
good.
yeah, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so it'd be B George, B as in boy, George at jpshealth.net.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on and thank you for sharing your time with us. I am very excited to start using this platform to share things that are going to inspire PAs and show them that working a job that you hate for 20 years until it's time for you to retire is not a good plan,
Yeah.
and that there is a different way. And that if you're unhappy, you can change things where you are or leave and find somewhere where you do feel happy and inspired and your passion is very clear. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, yeah, thanks for having me. And I think you're doing an awesome thing. I hope that a lot of people see what you're doing and are inspired to make some changes.
Thank you, as always, for tuning in to the PA is in. If this episode helped you at all, if the advice we gave and the short stories that we shared resonated with you, served you, or helped you to feel less alone or discouraged about your current position in healthcare, or even more inspired to create change in your department, then I would so appreciate it if you could head to iTunes and leave a 5-star review and tell everyone why you love the show. Take a screenshot, share it on social media so that other PAs can find and benefit from this show just like you. Thank you for tuning in to the show by PAs for PAs, where we help you to live long and prosper. It's your turn to get inspired, to take effective action, and to become one of those unicorn PAs who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work optional financial freedom. This PA is out.